Hola chicos y chicas, soy señora Zaramsky y tengo aquí la señora Jacerda.
Hola, estudiantes.
Today we are going to talk about asking someone's name and to ask who someone is or to say who someone is. On our first screen here, we have ¿Cómo te llamas? It means, what is your name? Literally, it means, what do you call yourself? So I'm going to ask Mrs. Jacerda in a minute, ¿Cómo te llamas? And she's going to say, Me llamo Señora Jacerda. Y tú, because we're the same age. So, y tú, we're friends. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Here we go. Hola, ¿cómo te llamas?
Hola, me llamo Señora Jacerda. ¿Y tú?
Me llamo Señora Zaramsky. You notice how we both said, she said y tú to me? That's because we are friends. Now we're going to move to the next slide and we're going to talk about something else. Okay, now you look at this screen and it says, ¿Cómo se llama usted? And she says, Soy Alba Garcia. Notice how we're using usted. In the last screen, we talked about tú. Mrs. Jacerda said to me, y tú. Well, now we're going to role play a little bit here. I'm going to be the student, and Mrs. Jacerda is going to be the principal. So I say to her, Hola, ¿cómo se llama usted?
Soy Alba Garcia.
Muy bien. Notice, nothing changed in her response, but in my question I had to use usted because I'm talking to someone who's older than me or someone who I'm not familiar with. Let's talk about usted again really quick. Usted is used when you're talking to someone with a title. That's a little bit easier for us to understand. For example, Mr. or Mrs. or Grandma or Grandpa, depending on if it's your grandma or grandpa. Now we're going to talk about asking who somebody is. If you look at the picture here, this girl wants to know and is asking her friend, who is she? So I'm gonna be this gal, and this is who Mrs. Jacerda is gonna be. So I say, ¿Cómo se llama ella?
Ella se llama Paula.
Ay, muy bien. So we were asking who she is. That's ella. Notice say changes. Well, now we have a screen here. This is our review screen. If you look on page 6 of your textbook, in the Exprésate box, we have to ask a classmate or other young person's name. Remember, I said before, ¿Cómo te llamas? And Mrs. Jacerda replied,
Me llamo Rita.
notice over here, that's where her reply came. Now I'm pretending to be the student, and I say to her, ¿Cómo se llama usted?
Me llamo Señora Jacerda.
Notice how her answer was the same both times. But when I was her friend, I said te llamas. When I'm the student and she was the teacher, I said se llama usted. Now we can add one little piece of information here. If you look around here, this says soy. I'm gonna be the friend asking my friend's name. ¿Cómo te llamas?
Soy Rita. ¿Y tú?
Soy Carrie. Now if I'm the student asking my teacher, I say, ¿Cómo se llama usted?
Soy Señora Jacerda. ¿Y tú?
Soy Carrie. Notice there's just some small differences between the familiar and the formal, but our answers are all the same. Now we can look down here. When we're wanting to ask who someone is, remember our third picture? We have ¿Cómo se llama ella? And Mrs. Jacerda responds,
Ella se llama Juana.
if there's a boy that we're looking at, we're going to say ¿Cómo se llama él?
Él se llama Roberto.
Really pretty easy. You just have to pay attention to who you're talking about. Notice we have a se llama here, se llama here, just like above when we're using the usted form. Another way to ask who someone is, just like in English, we say who is she or he or she before we asked what is his or her name. So I say, ¿Quién es él?
Él es Roberto.
So who is he? He is Roberto. ¿Quién es ella?
Ella es María.
Who is she? She is Maria. Now take some time to practice this so you can practice quién and cómo se llama. Have fun. Hasta luego.
Adiós.